The millionaire hired a fake girlfriend for his ex's party, but she stole the spotlight that night. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She never thought her Tuesday would change everything. Jasmine adjusted the vintage hardcover on the display table, her fingertips tracing the golden letters embossed on the deep blue spine. The afternoon light filtered through the large windows of Between the Lines, casting warm patterns across the wooden floors of the cozy Brooklyn bookstore. At 27, she had grown to love this sanctuary of stories, where the scent of aged paper mixed with freshly brewed coffee from the corner cafe next door. Her dark brown skin glowed softly in the natural light, and her hair, a beautiful crown of tight coils, was pulled back into a low bun that revealed the graceful curve of her neck. She wore a cream-colored sweater that hugged her curves perfectly, paired with high-waisted jeans that made her feel both comfortable and confident. Jasmine had always possessed an understated elegance, the kind that didn't need designer labels to command attention. "Another romance novel?" teased Marcus, her co-worker, as he wheeled a cart of returns past her display. "Love stories never go out of style," she replied, with a gentle smile that reached her warm amber eyes. "Besides, everyone deserves to believe in happy endings." The bell above the entrance chimed, and Jasmine looked up from her arrangement. A tall figure stepped inside, and the entire atmosphere of the store seemed to shift. The man was striking, over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal gray suit impeccably. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his steel blue eyes surveyed the bookstore with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Braino Hart. She recognized him from magazine covers and society pages, though seeing him in person was entirely different. At 36, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who owned boardrooms and commanded respect. His jawline was sharp, his features aristocratic, and when he moved it was with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. But there was something else in his expression, a tightness around his eyes that spoke of recent stress. "Can I help you?" Jasmine asked, approaching him with professional courtesy, though her heart had inexplicably started beating faster. Braino turned to face her fully, and for a moment he seemed to study her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Actually," he said, his voice deep and smooth with just a hint of vulnerability beneath the confidence, "I think you might be exactly what I need." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, her natural wit surfacing. "Well, that depends. Are you looking for a book recommendation or something more complicated?" A genuine smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first real expression she'd seen from him. "Definitely more complicated." He glanced around the nearly empty store, then back at her. "This might sound insane, but I have a proposition for you, and before you say no, hear me out." "I'm listening," Jasmine said, crossing her arms but maintaining an open expression. There was something about his directness that intrigued her, even as warning bells chimed softly in the back of her mind. "I need a date, not just any date. I need someone to accompany me to my ex-fiancé's birthday party this Saturday, someone who can hold their own in a room full of—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Challenging people." Jasmine's eyebrows rose higher. "Your ex-fiancé's party? That sounds like the premise of a very complicated book." "More complicated than you know," Braino admitted, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him seem suddenly more human, less like the untouchable businessman from the magazines. "Look, I'll be honest with you. 3 years ago, she left me at the altar, in front of 300 guests. It was humiliating." The vulnerability in his voice made something inside Jasmine's chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. "I'm sorry. That must have been devastating." "It was. And now she's getting married again, and she specifically invited me to her birthday party, which is really just another engagement celebration. I think she wants to see if she can still affect me." Jasmine studied his face, noting the way his jaw tightened when he spoke about his ex. "And can she?" "Not in the way she hopes," he said quietly, "but I'd rather not walk in there alone, giving her the satisfaction of thinking I'm still the broken man she left behind." "So, you want me to be your—" "What exactly?" "My girlfriend, just for one evening. I'll pay you, of course." "Stop!" Jasmine held up a hand, her expression shifting from curious to slightly offended. "I'm not an escort, Mr. Hart. That's not— I didn't mean—" Braino looked genuinely flustered for the first time since entering the store. "I'm not asking for anything inappropriate. I just need someone intelligent, confident, and genuine to stand beside me for a few hours. Someone who won't be intimidated by wealth or status. Someone who can be herself. Jasmine tilted her head, studying him. Why me? You don't even know me. Because, he said, his voice becoming softer, more sincere, in the 5 minutes we've been talking, you've made me feel more like myself than I have in months. You're not trying to impress me or use me for something. You're just real. The honesty in his words caught her off guard. Jasmine felt her defenses wavering slightly, though she maintained her composed exterior. This is crazy. Completely, Breno agreed. But sometimes crazy is exactly what we need. She was quiet for a long moment, her mind racing. There was something about Breno that drew her in, not just his obvious attractiveness, but the way he looked at her like she mattered, like her opinion held weight. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her that way. What exactly would this involve? She found herself asking. One evening, I pick you up, we go to the party together, we leave together. You get to wear a beautiful dress, eat expensive food, and help a man salvage a little dignity. And in return, name your price. Jasmine shook her head. If I were to even consider this, and I'm not saying I am, it wouldn't be about money. Then what would it be about? She looked into his steel blue eyes and saw something there that made her pulse race again. I'd have to think about it. Breno reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. My personal number. If you decide you're interested in helping a stranger navigate one very awkward evening, call me. He placed the card on the counter between them, his fingers brushing hers briefly as he did. The contact sent an unexpected jolt of electricity up her arm. Think about it, Jasmine, he said, and she realized she'd never told him her name. At her surprised look, he smiled. Your name tag. As he turned to leave, Jasmine called after him. How do you know I won't just take your money and disappear? Breno paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression that was both serious and amused. Because something tells me you're the kind of woman who finishes what she starts. The bell chimed as he left, and Jasmine stood alone in the suddenly quiet bookstore, staring at the business card in her hand and wondering if she'd just been offered the most dangerous opportunity of her life. 3 days later, Jasmine was still carrying his card in her purse. She pulled it out for the dozenth time while waiting for her coffee at Sunrise Cafe, the small corner shop where she grabbed her morning latte before work. The morning rush had died down, leaving only the gentle hum of the espresso machine and the soft jazz playing overhead. Through the large windows, Brooklyn was waking up, joggers passing by, commuters hurrying to the subway, life moving at its familiar pace. How you're staring at that thing like it's gonna bite you, observed Kendra, the cafe owner, as she wiped down the counter. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked braids and knowing eyes, Kendra had become something of a mother figure to Jasmine over the past 2 years. It's complicated, Jasmine murmured, tucking the card back into her wallet. Honey, the best things usually are. What's got you so twisted up? Jasmine hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about Breno's proposition. It felt too surreal, too dangerous to voice out loud. Someone asked me to do something that could either be really exciting or really stupid. Those two things ain't mutually exclusive, Kendra said with a knowing smile. Sometimes the stupidest things we do turn out to be the most important. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Her heart rate immediately spiked as she recognized the possibility of who it might be. Hello, Jasmine. The deep familiar voice made her stomach flutter. It's Breno. I hope you don't mind me calling. She stepped outside the cafe, needing the fresh air. How did you get my number? I asked Marcus at the bookstore. I told him I wanted to buy you coffee to thank you for helping me find a book. There was a pause and she could hear the smile in his voice. He was very protective of you, by the way. Made me promise I wasn't a creep. Despite herself, Jasmine laughed. And what did you tell him? That I was probably a little bit of a creep, but harmless. Honesty, I appreciate that. She found herself relaxing against the cafe's brick wall, watching the morning light filter through the trees lining the street. Have you thought about my proposition? Jasmine closed her eyes. She had thought about little else. I have. And I think you're insane. Probably. Does that mean you're saying no? She was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sounds of the city around her. Car horns, distant laughter, the rumble of the subway beneath her feet. Normal life continuing while she stood on the precipice of something entirely different. Where would this party be? She heard herself ask. The Metropolitan Club, Upper East Side. Of course it would be somewhere she'd never set foot. And you're sure this isn't some elaborate scheme to kidnap me or sell my organs? His laugh was warm and genuine. I promise your organs are safe with me. though I can't guarantee your sanity will be intact after spending an evening with Manhattan's social elite. What time would you pick me up? 7 o'clock. The party starts at 8, but I like to arrive fashionably late. Makes an entrance. Jasmine found herself picturing it, walking into an elegant ballroom on the arm of a man like Breno Hart, feeling the weight of eyes watching them, wondering who she was and where she'd come from. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it sent a thrill through her that she couldn't quite explain. "I'll need a dress," she said before she could stop herself. There was a pause on the other end. "Does that mean you're saying yes?" "It means I'm saying maybe. A very cautious maybe." "I'll take it. And Jasmine? Don't worry about the dress. I'll take care of everything." "I can buy my own dress, thank you." "I'm sure you can, but consider it part of the arrangement. Besides," his voice softened, "I want you to feel beautiful." The sincerity in his words caught her off guard. "I already feel beautiful." "Good. Then I want everyone else to see what I see." Heat rose in her cheeks, and she was grateful he couldn't see her reaction. "You're very smooth, Mr. Hart." "Breno." "And I'm not trying to be smooth, I'm trying to be honest." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the unspoken possibility of what Saturday night might bring. "Can I ask you something?" Jasmine said finally. "Anything. Why is this so important to you? This party, proving something to your ex, why does it matter?" Breno was quiet for so long, she thought the call might have dropped. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "Because for 3 years I've been living like a man with something to prove, building walls, keeping people at arm's length, convincing myself that being alone was better than being vulnerable. But lately," he trailed off. "Lately what?" "Lately I've been wondering if maybe I've been so focused on protecting myself that I've forgotten how to actually live." His honesty surprised her. This wasn't the confident businessman from the magazines. This was a man admitting to his own fears, his own loneliness. "And you think one evening with a fake girlfriend is going to fix that?" "No," he said quietly, "but I think it might be a start." Jasmine felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of shared loneliness that she hadn't expected. She thought about her own carefully constructed life, safe job, predictable routine, walls built around her own heart to keep disappointment at bay. "Okay," she said before she could change her mind. "Okay, I'll do it. One evening. But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, this is purely pretend. We're clear about that going in. Crystal clear. Second, if I feel uncomfortable at any point, I can leave." "Of course." "And third," she hesitated, then decided to be as honest as he had been. "I need you to know that I'm not usually the kind of person who does things like this, so if I seem nervous or out of place—" "Jasmine," his voice was gentle, reassuring, "you could never be out of place. And nervous is fine, we'll figure it out together." Something about the way he said "together" made her heart skip. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now I send a car to pick you up tomorrow afternoon. We'll go shopping for your dress, maybe grab dinner, and I'll fill you in on everything you need to know about Saturday night." A whole afternoon together? That wasn't part of the deal. Consider it a rehearsal. Besides, she could hear the smile in his voice again. "If we're going to convince anyone we're together, we should probably know more about each other than each other's names." He had a point. "Fine, but I choose the restaurant. Deal. Text me your address and any dietary restrictions, and Jasmine?" "Yeah? Thank you for saying yes." After they hung up, Jasmine stood outside the cafe for several more minutes, staring at her phone and trying to process what she'd just agreed to. In less than 48 hours, she would be entering a world she'd only seen in movies, on the arm of a man who made her pulse race just by saying her name. She walked back into the cafe, where Kendra was arranging pastries in the display case. "You look like a woman who just made a decision," Kendra observed. "I think I just agreed to something completely crazy." "Good for you, honey. Life's too short for safe choices." As Jasmine headed to work, Breno's business card now safely tucked away in her wallet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped off a cliff and was about to discover whether she could fly. The question was, would Breno be there to catch her if she fell? The Blacktown car felt like something from another world. Jasmine smoothed her hands over her dark jeans as the driver navigated through Manhattan traffic, trying not to stare too obviously at the plush leather interior and the small bar built into the partition. She'd dressed carefully that afternoon, a soft burgundy blouse that brought out the warm undertones in her skin, paired with her favorite black ankle boots. Confident but not trying too hard. Her phone buzzed with a text from Breno. "Almost there. Hope you're ready for an adventure." Before she could respond, The car pulled up in front of a boutique on Madison Avenue that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. The storefront was elegant and understated, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a single stunning gown on a mannequin. No price tags in sight, never a good sign for her budget, even if Breno was paying. "Miss Richardson," the driver's voice through the intercom made her jump. "Mr. Hart is waiting inside." Miss Richardson? She almost corrected him, then realized this was probably part of whatever story Breno had constructed. Fake girlfriend, fake name. She was already living a lie, and they hadn't even bought the dress yet. The boutique's interior was even more intimidating than the exterior. Soft classical music played while impeccably dressed staff moved between racks of gowns that probably cost more than Jasmine made in 3 months. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in warm, flattering light, and fresh white orchids sat on every surface. "Jasmine!" She turned to find Breno rising from a velvet armchair in the corner, and her breath caught. Gone was the business suit from their first meeting. Today he wore dark jeans that fit him perfectly, a charcoal cashmere sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders, and a black leather jacket that made him look less like a businessman and more like trouble. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and when he smiled at her, she felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. "You look beautiful," he said, approaching her with the easy confidence that seemed to be his default setting. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, proud that her voice came out steady despite the way he was looking at her. "Jasmine, this is Camille," Breno said, gesturing to an elegant woman with silver hair and impeccable posture who seemed to materialize beside them. "She's going to help us find you the perfect dress." Camille looked Jasmine up and down with the practiced eye of someone who dressed wealthy women for a living. "Stunning bone structure," she murmured, more to herself than to them. "And that skin, we can work with anything. What's the occasion?" "A birthday party," Breno answered smoothly. "Something elegant but not overly formal. She needs to be comfortable." "And memorable," Camille added with a knowing look. "Follow me." As they moved deeper into the boutique, Jasmine found herself walking beside Breno, acutely aware of his presence. When his hand touched the small of her back to guide her around a display, the contact sent warmth spreading through her entire body. "You okay?" he asked quietly, noticing her slight tension. "This feels very pretty, woman," she admitted under her breath. His laugh was soft and warm. "Except you're not a prostitute and I'm not buying your services. I'm asking for your help." "The line feels a little blurry from where I'm standing." Breno stopped walking and turned to face her fully, his steel blue eyes serious. "If you want to leave, we can leave right now. No questions asked, no hard feelings." There was something in his expression, complete sincerity, no manipulation, that made her realize he genuinely meant it. He would walk away from his plan, from the party, from whatever point he was trying to prove, if she felt uncomfortable. "No," she said softly. "I want to stay." The relief in his smile was subtle but unmistakable. "Wonderful," Camille interrupted, holding up a midnight blue gown that sparkled like starlight. "Let's start with this." For the next hour, Jasmine found herself in a montage she'd only seen in movies. Dress after dress, each more beautiful than the last, emerald silk that brought out her eyes, deep burgundy velvet that hugged her curves, classic black that made her feel like Audrey Hepburn. Breno sat in his chair, offering opinions when asked, but mostly just watching her with an intensity that made her pulse race. "That one's beautiful," he said, when she emerged in a champagne-colored gown with delicate beading. "But it's not you." "What do you mean, not me?" "It's safe, pretty, elegant, completely appropriate, but it doesn't—" He gestured vaguely, searching for words. "It doesn't capture who you are." Jasmine looked at herself in the three-way mirror. He was right. The dress was gorgeous, but she felt like she was playing dress-up rather than embodying something true to herself. "I think I have just the thing," Camille said, disappearing into the back of the store. When she returned, she was carrying a dress that made Jasmine's breath catch. It was a deep forest green that seemed to shimmer between emerald and jade, depending on how the light hit it. The cut was elegant but modern, off the shoulder with a fitted bodice that would emphasize her curves and a flowing skirt that moved like water. "Now this," Camille said with satisfaction, "this is for a woman who isn't afraid to be noticed." Jasmine took the dress into the fitting room, and the moment she slipped it on, she knew this wasn't just a dress. It was armor. It was confidence made fabric. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see someone playing pretend. She saw herself, elevated. She stepped out of the fitting room, and Breno's reaction was immediate and visceral. He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving her face, and for a moment he seemed to forget how to speak. "Jasmine," he said finally, his voice rougher than usual. "That bad?" she asked, though she could see in his expression that it was anything but. "That perfect." The way he was looking at her, like she was something precious and powerful, made heat rise in her cheeks. She turned to face the mirror, and for a moment she understood what he'd been trying to explain. This dress didn't hide who she was, it amplified it. "I'll take it," she said, surprising herself with the decisiveness in her voice. "Excellent choice," Camille beamed. "Now let's talk about accessories." About another hour passed in a blur of shoes, strappy heels that made her legs look endless, jewelry, simple diamond earrings that caught the light perfectly, and a small clutch that completed the ensemble. Through it all, Breno watched and occasionally offered input, but mostly he seemed content to observe her transformation. "I feel like Cinderella," Jasmine admitted as they prepared to leave the boutique, garment bags in hand. "Cinderella was pretending to be something she wasn't," Breno said as he held the door open for her. "You're just letting people see what was always there." They walked to his car, a sleek black BMW that somehow managed to be both understated and obviously expensive, and he held the passenger door open for her. "Hungry?" he asked as he settled into the driver's seat. "Starving. Where are we going?" "That's up to you. You said you got to choose the restaurant." Jasmine grinned, suddenly feeling mischievous. "You might regret giving me that power." 20 minutes later, Breno found himself sitting across from her in a tiny Ethiopian restaurant in Brooklyn, looking completely out of place and absolutely charmed by it. "This is not what I expected," he admitted, watching her demonstrate how to use injera bread to scoop up the spiced lentils. "What did you expect? Something with white tablecloths and a wine list I couldn't pronounce. And instead you get communal eating and honey wine." She took a sip of tej from her glass. "Disappointed?" "The opposite." He tried to follow her lead with the bread, making a mess of it, and her laugh was so genuine and infectious that he found himself laughing too. "This is the most fun I've had in months, even though you're probably getting lentils on that expensive sweater. Especially because I'm getting lentils on this expensive sweater." They talked through dinner, about books, travel, family, dreams deferred, and dreams still chased. Jasmine learned that Breno had wanted to be an architect before inheriting his father's investment firm, that he still sketched buildings in his spare time, that he'd never been to Ethiopia but had always wanted to visit. Breno discovered that Jasmine had studied literature in college, that she wrote poetry in a journal she kept hidden under her bed, that she'd grown up with her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. "I'm sorry," he said quietly when she shared that last detail. "It was a long time ago. And my grandmother, Nana Corinne, she was amazing. Taught me that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up with grace." "She sounds like she raised an incredible woman." The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter again. "She would have liked you." "How can you be sure?" "Because she always said the measure of a man wasn't in what he had, but in how he treated people who couldn't do anything for him." Jasmine met his eyes across the small table. "You've been nothing but kind to me, even though you barely know me. Maybe that's exactly why." The words hung between them, loaded with possibility, and something that felt dangerously close to the truth. As they walked back to his car, bags from the boutique in hand, Jasmine realized that somewhere between the dress fitting and the honey wine, this had stopped feeling like a business arrangement. The man walking beside her, pointing out architectural details of buildings they passed, wasn't the intimidating businessman from the magazines. He was funny and thoughtful, and surprisingly vulnerable, and she was in serious danger of forgetting that Saturday night was supposed to be pretend. "Thank you," she said as he started the car, "for today. The dress, dinner, all of it. Thank you for saying yes to all of it." As Brooklyn blurred past the windows, Jasmine caught her reflection in the passenger side mirror. Tomorrow she would go back to being a bookstore clerk in jeans and sweaters. But Saturday night she would be the woman in the green dress, walking into a world of wealth and privilege on the arm of a man who made her forget her own name. The question was, when the evening was over and the dress was hanging in her closet, would she be able to go back to being just Jasmine, or had she already crossed a line she couldn't uncross? Only one way to find out. Saturday arrived like a storm Jasmine wasn't prepared for. She spent the morning in her small but cozy apartment, trying to calm her nerves with familiar routines. Coffee in her favorite mug, a ceramic piece painted with sunflowers that her grandmother had given her, a long bath with lavender oils, painting her nails a deep burgundy, that would complement the green dress hanging on her bedroom door like a beautiful threat. Her apartment reflected her personality perfectly. Warm hardwood floors covered with vintage rugs, bookshelves lining every wall, plants thriving in the large windows that overlooked the tree-lined street. It was modest but carefully curated, each piece chosen for meaning rather than expense. Tonight she would leave this sanctuary and enter a world where everything was chosen for its price tag. By 5 o'clock, she had changed her mind about going approximately 17 times. Her phone buzzed with a text from Breno. "Car will be there at 6:45. You're going to be incredible tonight." The confidence in his words steadied her. She could do this. She was doing this for him, yes, but also for herself, to prove that a girl from Brooklyn could walk into Manhattan's most elite circles and belong there, even if just for one night. The transformation began at 6. She slipped into the green dress and once again felt that surge of power and confidence. The fabric hugged her curves perfectly, the color making her dark skin glow, and her amber eyes seemed to sparkle. She'd spent extra time on her makeup, subtle but striking, with a bold lip that matched her nails. Her hair was styled in soft waves that cascaded over one shoulder, leaving the other bare to show off the elegant line of her neck and the diamond earrings Breno had insisted on. When she looked in her full-length mirror, she barely recognized herself. This woman looked like she belonged in ballrooms and society pages. This woman looked like she could capture the attention of any man in any room. At exactly 6:45, her buzzer rang. "Miss Richardson?" came the driver's voice through the intercom. "Mr. Hart is here for you." Jasmine grabbed her clutch, took one last look at her reflection and whispered, "Here goes nothing." The elevator ride down felt like descending into another life. When the doors opened, Breno was standing in her modest lobby, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. His black tuxedo was perfectly tailored, emphasizing his broad shoulders and lean waist. His hair was styled to perfection, and when he turned to face her, his steel blue eyes widened with something that looked dangerously close to awe. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Jasmine," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "Is it too much?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious under the intensity of his gaze. "You're perfect." He stepped closer, and she caught his scent. Expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him that made her pulse race. Absolutely perfect. He offered her his arm, and as she took it, she felt the solid warmth of him through his jacket. "Ready for this?" "No," she admitted with a nervous laugh, "but I'm doing it anyway." The ride to the Metropolitan Club passed in a blur of Manhattan lights and final preparations. Breno filled her in on key details. His ex-fiancée's name was Delphine Montclair. She was marrying a tech mogul named Harrison Vale, and the guest list read like a who's who of New York society. "The important thing to remember," he said as they neared their destination, "is that we've been together for 3 months. We met at a gallery opening in Chelsea. You're an art consultant, successful in your own right, not impressed by money or status. Art consultant, you have a literature degree and excellent taste. It's not that much of a stretch. And how serious are we supposed to be?" Breno's hand found hers in the darkness of the car. "Serious enough that people believe I'm completely gone for you." The warmth of his fingers intertwined with hers sent electricity up her arm. "And are you? Completely gone for me?" He turned to look at her, and in the passing streetlights she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "That's the problem, Jasmine. I'm not sure I'm acting anymore." Before she could respond, the car pulled up in front of the Metropolitan Club, and suddenly there were valets and doormen and the kind of grandeur that belonged in movies, not in her real life. Breno stepped out first, then offered her his hand. The moment her heels touched the sidewalk, she felt the transformation complete itself. She was no longer Jasmine, the bookstore clerk. Tonight, she was Jasmine Richardson, art consultant, the woman who had captured the heart of Breno Hart. The ballroom was a vision of old-world elegance, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over marble columns, fresh white orchids and roses arranged in towering displays, a string quartet playing softly in one corner. Women in designer gowns glided across the room like graceful swans, while men in perfectly tailored tuxedos stood in small groups discussing business and politics, and every single eye turned to watch them enter. "Breathe," Breno whispered against her ear, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "I am breathing," she whispered back. "Good, because you're about to meet Delphine." Jasmine followed his gaze across the room to where a stunning blonde woman in a white dress, of course it was white, was holding court near the champagne fountain. Delphine Montclair was everything Jasmine had expected and feared. Tall, willowy, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from generations of privilege. Her dress probably cost more than Jasmine's rent for 6 months, and she wore it like armor. "She's beautiful," Jasmine said honestly. "She is," Breno agreed. "And completely cold. I should have seen it sooner." As if sensing their presence, Delphine looked up, her pale blue eyes finding Breno across the crowded room. Her smile was practiced and sharp as a blade. "She's coming over," Jasmine murmured. "Stay close to me," Breno said, his arm tightening protectively around her waist. Delphine approached with the confidence of a woman who had never been denied anything she wanted. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Porcelain skin, perfectly sculpted features, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Breno," she purred, air-kissing him on both cheeks. "I'm so glad you could make it, and you must be—" Her gaze shifted to Jasmine, assessing and dismissive in the span of a heartbeat. "Jasmine Richardson," Jasmine said smoothly, extending her hand with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Congratulations on your engagement." Delphine's handshake was firm but brief. "Thank you, and what do you do, Jasmine?" "I'm an art consultant. I help private collectors acquire pieces for their homes and offices." "How interesting." Delphine's tone suggested it was anything but. "And how did you two meet?" "Gallery opening in Chelsea," Breno said, his hand finding Jasmine's waist again. "Jasmine was representing a piece I was interested in. One conversation and I was completely captivated." The way he said it, looking directly at Jasmine with warmth and admiration, made her heart skip. For a moment she forgot they were acting. "How romantic," Delphine said, though her expression suggested she found it anything but. "Well, I do hope you'll enjoy the party. The wine is exceptional, and Harrison spared no expense on the entertainment." As she glided away, Jasmine let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "That went well," Breno said with a slight smile. "She hates me. She's intimidated by you. There's a difference." Before Jasmine could ask what he meant, a waiter appeared with champagne, and suddenly they were swept into the social whirlwind of the party. Breno introduced her to business associates, old friends and society fixtures, and to her surprise, Jasmine found herself enjoying the conversations. People were genuinely interested in her opinions about art, her recommendations for galleries, her thoughts on the city's cultural scene. "You're a natural at this," Breno murmured during a quiet moment as they stood near the windows overlooking Central Park. "I'm as surprised as you are." "I'm not surprised at all. You're intelligent, beautiful, and genuine. Of course people are drawn to you." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. "Breno, dance with me," he said suddenly, extending his hand as the string quartet began playing something slow and romantic. The dance floor was small and intimate, surrounded by flickering candles. When Breno pulled her into his arms, Jasmine felt like the rest of the world faded away. His hand was warm against her back, his other hand holding hers gently but securely. They moved together as if they'd been dancing for years, not minutes. "This is nice," she said softly, looking up into his steel blue eyes. "Better than nice," he replied, spinning her gently before pulling her close again. She could feel the solid warmth of his chest against hers, could smell his cologne and something uniquely him underneath it. When he looked at her like this, like she was the only woman in the room, like she mattered, it was easy to forget that this was all pretend. "Jasmine," he said, his voice lower, more intimate. "Yeah? I need to tell you something." Her heart started beating faster. "What?" "This thing between us. I know we said it was fake, but, well, isn't this cozy?" They turned to find Delphine standing at the edge of the dance floor, her smile sharp and predatory. Behind her stood a man Jasmine assumed was Harrison Vale, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing his net worth. "Delphine," Breno said carefully, his arms still around Jasmine. "I was just telling Harrison about your new friend." He was curious about her background. The way she said friend made it clear she thought Jasmine was something much less respectable. "Jasmine is an art consultant," Breno said evenly, "very successful in her field." "Of course she is," Delphine said with a laugh that was like ice-breaking, "though I have to say the dress is lovely, very bold choice for someone in your position." The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Jasmine felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Breno stepped closer to Delphine, his voice dropping to a tone Jasmine had never heard from him before, dangerous and protective. "Careful, Delphine. You're talking about the woman I love." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Delphine's eyes flashed with something ugly, while Harrison looked uncomfortable with the sudden tension. but it was Jasmine who felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Because when Breno said those words, "the woman I love," she saw something in his eyes that had nothing to do with acting, and everything to do with truth. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Jasmine felt her world tilt as Breno's words echoed in her mind. The woman I love. The way he'd said it, fierce, protective, completely genuine, sent her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with their charade. Around them, the party continued in elegant whispers and clinking glasses, but she felt suspended in this moment of raw honesty. Delphine's perfectly composed mask slipped for just an instant, revealing something sharp and wounded underneath. "How touching," she said, recovering with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to social warfare, "though I do wonder how well you really know each other." 3 months, wasn't it? "Long enough," Breno replied, his arm tightening protectively around Jasmine's waist. "Is it?" Delphine's smile turned predatory. "Then surely you know about Jasmine's background." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. Somehow, in the few hours since they'd arrived, Delphine had done research. Jasmine's stomach dropped as she realized what was coming. "I know everything I need to know," Breno said evenly, but Jasmine could feel the tension radiating from his body. "Do you?" Delphine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that Harrison and several nearby guests could still hear. "Did you know that your sophisticated art consultant works at a bookstore in Brooklyn? That she lives in a tiny apartment above a laundromat? That she—" "Stop!" Jasmine's voice cut through Delphine's words like a blade. The crowd around them had grown, drawn by the unmistakable scent of scandal. Jasmine could feel their eyes on her, could hear the whispered speculation beginning to ripple through the ballroom. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, but beneath the embarrassment something else was rising. Anger. "You want to know about my background?" Jasmine said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet space around them. "I work at a bookstore because I love books. I live in Brooklyn because that's where I'm from and I'm proud of it. And yes, my apartment is small, but it's mine, and I've earned every square foot of it." She stepped forward, and to her satisfaction, Delphine actually took a step back. "But what you don't know," Jasmine continued, her voice gaining strength, "is that I put myself through college on scholarships and work-study programs, that I read 5 languages and can discuss art, literature, and culture with anyone in this room, that I've never needed anyone to buy me a dress or a life to feel worthy." The ballroom had gone completely silent now. Even the string quartet seemed to have stopped playing. "And most importantly," Jasmine said, looking directly into Delphine's pale blue eyes, "I would never leave someone I claim to love standing at an altar, humiliated in front of everyone they cared about." The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Delphine's face went white, then flushed red with fury. "How dare you, ladies!" Harrison finally stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the scene his fiancée had created. "Perhaps we could—" "No." Delphine's voice was sharp with rage. "I want to know who this woman really thinks she is, coming into our world and acting like she belongs here." "Your world?" Jasmine's laugh was soft, but carried an edge that made several people shift uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, I thought this was America, where people were judged by their character, not their zip code." She looked around at the faces surrounding them, some hostile, some curious, but many showing something that looked like admiration. "I may not have grown up with money," Jasmine continued, "but I was raised to treat people with respect regardless of their circumstances, to value kindness over cruelty and substance over surface. If that doesn't qualify me for your world, then I'm not sure I want to be part of it anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from somewhere in the crowd came the sound of someone clapping. Slowly, others joined in, until a significant portion of the guests were applauding. Delphine looked around wildly, clearly not expecting this response. "This is ridiculous." "What's ridiculous," said a voice from the crowd, "is that you invited your ex-fiancé to your engagement party just to humiliate him, and instead ended up showing everyone exactly why he's better off without you." The speaker was an elegant older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, someone Jasmine didn't recognize but who clearly carried weight in this social circle. "Cordelia," Delphine started. "No, dear. I've known your family for years, and this behavior is beneath you." Cordelia moved gracefully through the crowd toward Jasmine and Breno. "And you, my dear," she said to Jasmine, "have just reminded everyone in this room what real class looks like." More murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Delphine looked around desperately, realizing that her attempt to humiliate Jasmine had backfired spectacularly. "Come, Harrison," she said finally, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "I need some air." As they walked away, the crowd began to disperse, but many people approached Jasmine and Breno to introduce themselves properly, to compliment Jasmine on her grace under pressure, to express their admiration for how she'd handled herself. "That was incredible," whispered a young woman about Jasmine's age. "I've been wanting to say something like that to Delphine for years." "She had it coming," agreed her companion. "Did you see her face when you mentioned the altar? Priceless." As the immediate excitement died down and conversations returned to normal party chatter, Breno guided Jasmine toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands gently framing her face. "I think so." Jasmine was surprised to find that she was. The confrontation had been terrifying, but standing up for herself, and for him, had felt empowering. "Though I probably just burned any bridges I might have wanted to build in Manhattan society." "Are you kidding? Half the people here are probably going to be calling you tomorrow wanting to be your friend. You just did what most of them have wanted to do for years but never had the courage." "You think so?" "I know so. You were magnificent, Jasmine. Absolutely magnificent." The pride in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. "I couldn't let her talk about you like that." "About us like that?" "Us?" Breno's voice was soft, questioning. Jasmine realized what she'd said, and suddenly the weight of everything that had happened tonight crashed down on her. The way he'd looked at her when she came downstairs, the feeling of dancing in his arms, the way he'd said, "the woman I love," like he meant it. "Breno," she started, but he shook his head. "Not here," he said quietly. "Too many people watching." "But Jasmine." "What?" "What I said to Delphine. About loving you." His steel blue eyes were serious, vulnerable. "I need you to know that wasn't part of the act." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere between Wednesday afternoon in your bookstore and right now, this stopped being pretend for me. I'm saying that when I look at you, I don't see a fake girlfriend. I see the most incredible woman I've ever met." The ballroom seemed to fade away around them. The elegant party, the designer gowns, the crystal chandeliers, none of it mattered. All that mattered was this man looking at her like she was his entire world. "Breno, I know this is crazy. I know we agreed this was temporary, just for tonight. But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is fake." Jasmine felt tears prick at her eyes. "You don't know me." "Not really. You know the version of me in this dress, in this world, but I know you read 5 languages and put yourself through college. I know you choose Ethiopian restaurants over fancy Manhattan establishments. I know you stand up to bullies even when you're scared. I know you're kind to bookstore customers and protective of the people you care about." His thumb traced gently across her cheekbone. "I know you well enough to know that I'm falling in love with you." The words hung between them, honest and terrifying and beautiful. "This is insane," Jasmine whispered. "Completely. We've known each other for 4 days. Best 4 days of my life. I work in a bookstore. You're a millionaire. And you just proved that doesn't matter to anyone who matters." She looked around the ballroom at the people who had applauded her, who had seen something in her worth defending. Maybe Breno was right. Maybe the differences that seemed so important on paper didn't actually matter in real life. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we leave this party," Breno said, taking her hand, "and we figure out what comes next. Together." As they walked toward the exit, Jasmine caught sight of Delphine across the room, watching them with undisguised hatred. But for the first time all evening, Jasmine wasn't intimidated. She had found her voice tonight, had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed. And she had found something else, too, the possibility of a love that was real, complicated, and worth fighting for. The question was, when they left this magical ballroom and returned to the real world, would what they'd found together survive the harsh light of day? The car ride back to Brooklyn felt like descending from a dream. Jasmine sat beside Breno in the back of the town car, her fingers still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the confrontation. The city lights blurred past the windows as they crossed back into her world, away from crystal chandeliers and marble columns, toward familiar brownstones and corner bodegas. The elegant dress that had made her feel like royalty now seemed almost too much for the modest streets of her neighborhood. "You're quiet," Breno observed, his voice soft in the darkness between them. "I'm processing." Jasmine smoothed the green silk of her skirt, trying to organize her thoughts. "Everything that just happened, it feels surreal." "Which part? Standing up to Delphine or me telling you I'm falling in love with you?" Her heart skipped at the directness of his question. "Both. All of it." The driver turned onto her street, and reality came rushing back. Tomorrow was Sunday. She had laundry to do, groceries to buy, a normal life to return to. Meanwhile, Braino would go back to his penthouse, his business meetings, his world of wealth and influence. Jasmine, his hand found hers in the darkness. Talk to me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that tonight was incredible, and I'm thinking that we're about to get out of this car and return to completely different worlds. The car pulled up in front of her building, a pre-war walk-up with a red brick facade and fire escapes zigzagging down the front. It was charming in its own way, but compared to the grandeur they'd just left, it felt almost absurdly ordinary. "Would you like to come up?" she asked, then immediately second-guessed herself. "I mean, it's just a regular apartment, nothing like what you're used to." "Jasmine," Braino's voice was gentle but firm. "Stop apologizing for who you are. I want to see where you live. I want to see your world." They climbed 3 flights of stairs, her heels echoing in the narrow hallway. As she fumbled with her keys, Jasmine felt suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't at the party. There, she'd been playing a role, wearing armor made of silk and confidence. Here, she would just be herself. "Welcome to my humble apartment," she said, opening the door and stepping aside to let him in. Braino stepped into her living room and stopped, taking it all in. The space was small but thoughtfully arranged, bookshelves covering nearly every wall, a comfortable reading chair by the window, plants thriving in ceramic pots, artwork from local artists covering the remaining wall space. Soft lamps cast warm light over everything, making it feel cozy rather than cramped. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "It's tiny. It's you." He turned to face her, his steel blue eyes warm with something that looked like wonder. "It's warm and thoughtful and beautiful. Just like you." Jasmine felt her defenses crumbling. "Can I get you something? Coffee, wine? I think I have some wine." "Jasmine." He stepped closer, his hands reaching up to gently cup her face. "Stop. Just stop for a minute." She took a shaky breath, looking up into his eyes. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "This. Whatever this is between us. I don't know how to be the woman who goes to parties at the Metropolitan Club and then comes home to Brooklyn. I don't know how to bridge that gap. Maybe you don't have to bridge anything. Maybe I come to Brooklyn." The suggestion caught her off guard. "Your life is in Manhattan. Your business, your friends, your whole world." "My world has been pretty empty lately," he admitted. "Until you." He was standing so close now that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. When he looked at her like this, like she was precious and wanted, it was hard to remember all the reasons this was complicated. "Braino," she whispered, "I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for 4 days, but I've never felt anything like this before." His thumb traced gently across her cheekbone. "When I saw you in that bookstore, something shifted. When you called me on my bullshit at dinner, when you chose that Ethiopian restaurant, when you stood up to Delphine tonight, you've been changing everything about how I see the world. And how do you see it now? Like maybe there's room in it for something real, something that isn't about status or appearances or proving anything to anyone, something that's just us." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. "But what does that look like in real life? You have board meetings and business dinners and you have a job you love and a life you've built and dreams I want to hear about." His other hand found her waist, drawing her closer. "We figure it out together day by day." Standing there in her small apartment, still wearing the dress that had made her feel like Cinderella, Jasmine realized that the magic wasn't in the ball gown or the ballroom. It was in the way Braino looked at her kitchen table, like it was just as valuable as any boardroom conference table. It was in the way he touched her books with reverence, as if understanding that they were windows into her soul. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of this being too good to be true. Of waking up tomorrow and discovering that tonight was just a beautiful fantasy. Then let me prove it's not." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "Let me take you to breakfast tomorrow. Not somewhere fancy, somewhere you choose. Let me meet your friends, see your bookstore, understand what matters to you. Let me show you that this isn't about the dress or the party or anything except you and me." The offer was tempting and terrifying in equal measure. "And if it doesn't work, if we're too different, then we'll figure that out too." "But Jasmine," his voice dropped to a whisper, "what if it does work? What if this thing between us is as real as it feels?" She looked into his eyes and saw her own hope reflected back at her. Maybe he was right. Maybe the differences that seemed so important were just obstacles they could overcome together. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay. Breakfast. Tomorrow. But I choose the place." His smile was radiant. "Deal." For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other in the soft light of her apartment. Then Breno's hand slid into her hair, and he was kissing her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Jasmine melted into him, her hands fisting in his tuxedo jacket, and for the first time all evening, everything felt simple and right. When they broke apart, both breathing slightly harder, Breno rested his forehead against hers again. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Let you get some sleep." "Probably," she agreed, though she made no move to step away from him. "But I don't want to. I don't want you to either." They stood there for another long moment, caught between desire and the knowledge that they had time, that this didn't have to be rushed or perfect right away. "Tomorrow," Breno said finally, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "I'll pick you up at 10. I'll be ready." As he moved toward the door, he paused, looking back at her standing in her green dress in her small, perfect apartment. "Jasmine." "Yeah? Thank you. For tonight, for being brave enough to say yes, for being exactly who you are. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing." After he left, Jasmine stood in her living room for a long time, touching her lips where he'd kissed her and trying to process everything that had changed in one extraordinary evening. She carefully hung the green dress in her closet, removed the diamond earrings and changed into her comfortable pajamas, but as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of her neighborhood, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn towards something beautiful and unknown. Tomorrow would be the real test. Tomorrow, without the magic of ball gowns and champagne, they would discover if what they'd found was strong enough to survive in the daylight. But for tonight, she let herself believe in fairy tales that came true and princes who fell in love with bookstore girls from Brooklyn. Tomorrow could wait. Jasmine woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. For a moment she lay still, the events of the previous night feeling like a vivid dream. Had she really stood up to Delphine Montclair in front of Manhattan's elite? Had Breno really kissed her in this very apartment and told her he was falling in love with her? The text message on her phone confirmed it was all real. "Good morning, beautiful. Still on for breakfast? I've been thinking about you since I left." A smile spread across her face as she typed back, "Good morning. Yes to breakfast. Fair warning, you're about to experience the best pancakes in Brooklyn." His response came immediately. "Can't wait. See you at 10. Jasmine climbed out of bed and padded to her bathroom, catching sight of herself in the mirror. Her hair was tousled from sleep, her face free of makeup, wearing an old college t-shirt and cotton shorts. This was the real her, no designer dress, no professional styling, just Jasmine on a Sunday morning. In a few hours, Breno would see this version of her too. She showered and chose her outfit carefully, not trying to impress but wanting to look like herself at her best. Dark jeans that fit her perfectly, a soft cream-colored sweater that brought out the warmth in her skin, and comfortable ankle boots. She left her hair in its natural waves and applied just enough makeup to look polished without trying too hard. At exactly 10 o'clock, her buzzer rang. "Be right down," she called through the intercom, grabbing her purse and jacket. When she stepped outside, Breno was leaning against a car, not the town car from last night, but a sleek navy blue sedan that somehow managed to look expensive and understated at the same time. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a grey button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a black leather jacket completing the look. Seeing him in her neighborhood, on her street, made her heart flutter all over again. "Hi," she said, suddenly feeling shy. "Hi, yourself." He pushed off from the car and approached her, his eyes warm with appreciation. "You look beautiful, even without the designer dress?" "Especially without the designer dress." He leaned down and kissed her cheek, the simple gesture sending warmth through her entire body. "Ready to show me these legendary pancakes?" They walked the 6 blocks to Beatrice's kitchen, a small diner that had been a neighborhood institution for 40 years. The morning was crisp and clear, perfect for walking, and Jasmine found herself relaxing as they strolled past familiar sights, the corner market where she bought her groceries, the small park where she sometimes read on weekends, the coffee shop where she'd agonized over his business card just days ago. "Tell me about growing up here," Breno said as they walked. "You mean Brooklyn?" "I mean your life, your family. What made you who you are?" Jasmine glanced at him, surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. "You really want to know?" "I want to know everything." So she told him about her parents, who had been teachers and had filled their small apartment with books and music and laughter until the car accident that changed everything, about moving in with her grandmother, Nana Corinne, who had been a seamstress with magic fingers, and an indomitable spirit. About working multiple jobs to pay for college, about falling in love with literature, about choosing the bookstore job because she'd rather make less money doing something she loved than more money being miserable. "She sounds incredible, your grandmother," Bruno said as they approached the diner. She was. "She taught me that elegance isn't about what you wear or where you live. It's about how you treat people and how you move through the world." "Smart woman." "She would have liked you," Jasmine said, then stopped walking. "Actually, no, she would have been suspicious of you at first." Bruno laughed. "Suspicious? Why?" "Because she always said to be wary of men who were too handsome and too smooth. She'd have made you prove you were worth my time." "And how would I have done that?" Jasmine considered this as they reached the diner's entrance. "By showing up, consistently, by being the same person in public and in private, by treating her corner bodega owner with the same respect you'd show a CEO. Good standards," Bruno said, holding the door open for her. Beatrice's kitchen was exactly what a neighborhood diner should be. Mismatched chairs, vinyl booths with a few cracks, the smell of bacon and coffee and home. The walls were covered with photos of regular customers, local high school sports teams, and handwritten thank you notes from people who'd found comfort in Beatrice's welcoming embrace. "Jasmine," called out a voice from behind the counter. "Haven't seen you in a couple weeks, honey." "Hi, B." Jasmine waved at the woman who had been running the diner for as long as anyone could remember. Beatrice was in her 60s, with silver hair always pulled back in a practical bun, and the kind of warm smile that made everyone feel like family. "And who's this handsome man?" Beatrice asked, eyeing Bruno with the protective interest of someone who'd watched Jasmine grow up. "Bruno Hart," he said, extending his hand. "Very pleased to meet you." Hart. Beatrice shook his hand while studying his face. "Why do I know that name?" "He's in business," Jasmine said quickly, shooting Bruno a look that said, "Please don't mention being a millionaire." Beatrice's expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced, but she led them to a booth by the window. "Well, any friend of Jasmine's is welcome here. Coffee, please," they both said. As Beatrice bustled away, Bruno looked around the diner with obvious appreciation. "This place is perfect. It's not much to look at. It's real. It's honest." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Like you." The simple touch sent warmth up her arm, and Jasmine marveled at how natural it felt to sit here with him, in her world, without any pretense or performance. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Last night, when you said you were falling in love with me, did you mean it? Or was it just the moment, the party, the whole fairy tale atmosphere?" Bruno was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing across her knuckles. "Do you want the honest answer?" "Always." "I meant it, and sitting here with you now in this diner, seeing you in your element, I mean it even more." Her heart did a little flip. "Even though I'm not wearing diamonds and silk? Especially because you're not wearing diamonds and silk. Jasmine, what you don't understand is that last night, you weren't playing a role. You were just being yourself in a fancy dress. The woman who stood up to Delphine, who made everyone in that ballroom fall a little bit in love with her. That was all you." Before she could respond, Beatrice returned with coffee and her order pad. "What'll it be, kids?" "The blueberry pancakes," Jasmine said, "with extra blueberries." "Same for me," Bruno added. "Good choice," Beatrice approved. "Jasmine's got excellent taste. In food, anyway. Jury's still out on men." She winked and walked away, leaving Bruno laughing and Jasmine blushing. "She's protective of you," he observed. "This whole neighborhood is. When you don't have family, you create it. And this is your family?" Jasmine looked around the diner, at Beatrice bustling between tables, at the regular customers reading newspapers and chatting with friends, at the photos on the walls documenting years of community and connection. "Part of it, yeah." Bruno followed her gaze, and she could see him taking it all in, really seeing it, not just looking at it. "I can't remember the last time I felt part of a community like this." "What do you mean?" "My world. It's all business relationships and social obligations. People know me because of my money or my connections. I can't remember the last time someone cared about me just because I was me." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest tight. "That sounds lonely." "It is. It has been. Until now." Their eyes met across the small table, and Jasmine felt that electric connection again, the sense that despite their different backgrounds, they understood each other in some fundamental way. "Bruno," she said softly. "Yeah? If we're going to do this, really do this, I need you to know that this is my life. Sunday morning diners and neighborhood barbecues and corner bookstores. I'm not going to change who I am to fit into your world." I don't want you to change. I want you to show me how to be part of yours." The sincerity in his voice took her breath away. "And what about your world? Your business? Your responsibilities? We'll figure it out. Together." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not saying it will be easy, but I think maybe I've been living in the wrong world anyway." Before she could ask what he meant, Beatrice arrived with their pancakes, fluffy stacks topped with fresh blueberries and a generous drizzle of maple syrup. "Eat up," she said. "And Breno, you treat our girl right, you hear?" "Yes, ma'am," he said solemnly. As they ate, the conversation flowed as easily as it had the night they'd had Ethiopian food. They talked about books and travel, about dreams and fears, about the small moments that made life beautiful. Breno told her about his architecture sketches, about buildings he'd never designed but still dreamed about. Jasmine shared her poetry, reading him a short piece she'd written about the way morning light hit her bedroom wall. "You're incredibly talented," he said when she finished. "It's just a hobby. Maybe it doesn't have to be." The suggestion hung between them, full of possibility and promise. As they finished their pancakes and lingered over coffee, Jasmine realized that this, sitting in a Brooklyn diner on a Sunday morning, talking about everything and nothing, felt more romantic than any fancy dinner or elegant ballroom. "What are you thinking about?" Breno asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking that if someone had told me a week ago that I'd be having breakfast with a millionaire who actually wants to be here, I'd have thought they were crazy. And now I'm thinking that maybe the best things in life really do come when you least expect them." Breno smiled, that warm, genuine expression that made her heart skip. "I couldn't agree more." As they prepared to leave, Beatrice came over with the check, but Breno had already placed cash on the table, enough to cover breakfast and a generous tip. "Thank you for the hospitality," he told her. "You come back any time," Beatrice said, then turned to Jasmine with a knowing look. "I like this one, honey. He's got good manners and he looks at you like you hung the moon." Walking back toward Jasmine's apartment, Breno took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, stopping to face her under the morning sun, "we see what comes next, day by day, just like we said. And if it gets complicated, then we figure it out together." He was looking at her with such tenderness, such certainty, that Jasmine felt her last defenses crumbling. Maybe this was crazy, maybe it was too fast, too different, too unlikely, but maybe, just maybe, it was also exactly right. Standing on her familiar Brooklyn street, holding hands with a man who saw beauty in her simple world, Jasmine realized that some fairy tales didn't end at midnight. Some of them were just beginning. 3 weeks later, Jasmine was discovering that falling in love was both easier and harder than she'd ever imagined. The easy part was everything about Breno himself. The way he brought her coffee from Sunrise Cafe every morning before work, having memorized exactly how she liked it. The way he listened to her read poetry aloud in her apartment on quiet evenings, his steel blue eyes never leaving her face. The way he'd started keeping architecture books at her place, sketching building designs while she organized inventory at the bookstore. The hard part was everything else. "Jasmine, there's someone here to see you," Marcus called from the front of Between the Lines, his voice carrying a note she'd never heard before, something between awe and confusion. She looked up from the children's section, where she'd been creating a new display, brushing dust off her dark jeans and adjusting her soft lavender cardigan. It was Thursday afternoon, typically one of their quieter times, perfect for reorganizing and restocking. Walking toward the front of the store, she stopped short when she saw the woman waiting by the counter. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than Jasmine's monthly rent, with platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe chignon. Everything about her screamed money and power. "Are you Jasmine Richardson?" the woman asked, her voice crisp and professional. "It's just Jasmine, and you are?" "Venetia Sterling. I represent the Hart family interests." She extended a business card with the kind of confidence that suggested she was used to people knowing exactly who she was. Jasmine's stomach dropped. "I see. What can I do for you, Mrs. Sterling?" "I think we should speak privately. Perhaps there's an office?" "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here," Jasmine replied, though she was acutely aware of Marcus hovering nearby, obviously listening to every word. Venetia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Very well. I'm here to discuss your relationship with Breno Hart. I'm not sure that's any of your business. I'm afraid it is. You see, Breno is about to close the largest deal in his company's history, a merger that would make Hart Investments one of the most powerful firms on the East Coast. The other parties involved are traditional in their values. They prefer to do business with men who share their conservative outlook on appropriate partnerships. The implication hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Appropriate partnerships. A young woman from Brooklyn working in a bookstore with no family connections or social standing. It's not the image they're looking for in a business partner's personal life. The words were delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep. Jasmine felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "And you think I should—" "What? Disappear? I think you should consider what's best for everyone involved, Breno included." Venetia reached into her briefcase and pulled out a check, placing it on the counter between them. "This should be more than enough to help you start fresh somewhere else. Perhaps pursue that poetry you're so passionate about." Jasmine stared at the check. The amount written there was staggering, more money than she'd see in 5 years of working at the bookstore. Enough to pay off her student loans, move somewhere new, maybe even publish her work. "You investigated me," she said quietly. "We investigate everyone who gets close to our clients. It's nothing personal. It feels pretty personal." Jasmine picked up the check, looking at it for a long moment, then deliberately tore it in half. "I'm not for sale, Miss Sterling." For the first time, Venetia's composure cracked slightly. "You're making a mistake. This deal is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Are you really willing to cost Breno everything he's worked for just because you've convinced yourself this little romance is real?" "What I'm convinced of," Jasmine said, her voice gaining strength, "is that any business partners who would judge someone based on who they love aren't the kind of people worth doing business with." How naive. This is the real world, Miss Jasmine. Feelings don't pay the bills or build empires. Maybe not. But they build something more important. And what's that? A life worth living. Venetia stared at her for a moment, then smiled coldly. "We'll see how romantic you feel when Breno loses everything because of you." After she left, the bookstore felt unnaturally quiet. Marcus approached slowly, his expression concerned. "Who was that?" he asked. "Trouble," Jasmine replied, picking up the torn pieces of the check and throwing them in the trash. But as the afternoon wore on, Venetia's words echoed in her mind. Hundreds of millions of dollars, everything he's worked for. What right did she have to potentially cost Breno his future? She'd seen how passionate he was about his work, how much the business meant to him. By the time Breno arrived to pick her up for dinner, Jasmine had worked herself into a state of quiet panic. "Hey, beautiful," he said, leaning over the counter to kiss her cheek. "How was your day?" "Fine," she lied, trying to smile normally. "Yours?" "Long meetings, but good. The Hartwell merger is moving forward faster than expected." His eyes lit up with excitement. "Jasmine, this could change everything for the company, for my future." Her heart sank. That's wonderful." He studied her face, his expression shifting to concern. "You okay? You seem off. Just tired. Maybe we could skip dinner tonight? I have some things I need to take care of." "Of course. But are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine," she said, the lie tasting bitter in her mouth. That evening, alone in her apartment, Jasmine found herself staring at her phone, Breno's contact information on the screen. She needed to tell him about Venetia's visit, about the choice she might be forcing him to make. But every time she started to dial, she imagined his face when he realized that being with her could cost him everything. 3 days passed. 3 days of Breno's increasingly concerned texts and calls, of her making excuses to avoid seeing him. She threw herself into work, staying late at the bookstore, reorganizing sections that didn't need reorganizing, anything to keep her mind busy. On Sunday morning, when her buzzer rang at exactly 10 o'clock, she almost didn't answer it. "Jasmine, it's me. We need to talk." His voice through the intercom was gentle but firm. She buzzed him up, her hands shaking slightly as she waited for the knock on her door. When she opened it, Breno looked tired and worried, his usually perfect hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. "What's going on?" he asked without preamble. "You've been avoiding me for 3 days and don't tell me you've been busy, because Kendra at the cafe said you haven't even been getting your morning coffee." "You talked to Kendra." "I've been worried sick. I thought something happened to you." He stepped into her apartment, closing the door behind him. "Talk to me, Jasmine. What's wrong?" She took a deep breath, knowing there was no way to make this easier. "Someone came to see me at the bookstore. Venetia Sterling." Breno's face went very still. "Venetia came to see you. She offered me money to disappear from your life, said I was bad for your image, that I could cost you some important merger." For a long moment, Breno didn't speak. When he did, his voice was dangerously quiet. "She offered you money. A lot of money, enough to change my life." "And?" And I told her I wasn't for sale. Jasmine wrapped her arms around herself. But Breno, if being with me is going to cost you your future, stop. He crossed the room in 2 quick strides, taking her face in his hands. Just stop right there. But the merger, fuck the merger. The vehemence in his voice surprised her. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. Jasmine, look at me. His steel blue eyes were fierce, determined. Do you really think I would choose any business deal over you? Over us? It's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's money. Just money. And if the Hartwells are the kind of people who would judge me based on who I love, then I don't want their money anyway. But your company, your employees, will be fine. There are other deals, other opportunities. But there's only one you. His thumbs traced across her cheekbones. Besides, I've been thinking lately that maybe it's time for a change anyway. What do you mean? I mean, maybe I don't want to run my father's investment firm for the rest of my life. Maybe I want to design buildings. Maybe I want to do something that actually matters. The possibility in his voice made her heart race. Breno, I've been sketching plans for boutique hotels, private residences, beautiful buildings that tell stories, architecture that's not just functional, but inspiring. He smiled, and she could see the excitement building in his expression. What if we started something together? My own architecture firm and maybe your own bookstore cafe, or even a small publishing house. We? You and me. Your knowledge of literature and culture, my business experience and design background. We could create our own world together. The vision he was painting was intoxicating, but Jasmine forced herself to stay grounded. That's a beautiful dream, but dreams don't pay the bills. Actually, they do. I have enough money saved to start fresh, to build something from scratch that's truly ours. A life where we both get to pursue what we love. His excitement was infectious. Jasmine, we could have our own little empire. Something that's completely ours. She stared at him. This man who was willing to walk away from hundreds of millions of dollars to build a life with her. You're serious. Dead serious. I love you, Jasmine. Not the version of you in a designer dress, not some fantasy, but you. The woman who reads poetry and fights for what she believes in and makes me want to be better than I am. He pulled her closer. I'm not losing you because some narrow-minded businessman can't see what I see. And what do you see? I see my future. I see the woman I want to build a life with, create something meaningful with. I see home. The sincerity in his voice broke down her last defenses. I love you too, she whispered. So much it scares me. Then let's be scared together. Let's build something beautiful together. As he kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise, Jasmine realized that sometimes the biggest risks led to the most extraordinary rewards. Maybe they were crazy to think they could build a life together, start a business together, change the world together. But maybe, just maybe, crazy was exactly what the world needed. The question was, would love really be enough to overcome everything standing in their way? 2 months later, Jasmine thought she had learned what happiness looked like. It looked like Breno bringing her coffee every morning, then staying to help Marcus reorganize the fiction section before heading to his own work. It looked like evenings spent in her apartment, him sketching building designs, while she read manuscripts from aspiring poets who'd started submitting work after word spread that she was considering starting a small press. It looked like lazy Sunday mornings at Beatrice's kitchen, where Bea had started automatically bringing them the usual without asking. It looked like planning a future together, one dream at a time. What do you think about this one? Breno asked, turning his sketchpad toward her. They were sitting in her living room on a rainy Thursday evening, surrounded by architectural drawings and manuscript pages. The design showed a small building with large windows and clean lines, welcoming but sophisticated. It's beautiful. What is it? Your bookstore cafe. I was thinking somewhere in Park Slope, maybe that corner space near the subway that's been empty for months. His eyes lit up with the excitement she'd grown to love. Ground floor for the bookstore and cafe, office space upstairs for the publishing house. What do you think? Jasmine studied the drawing, her heart swelling with possibility. I think it's perfect. I think you're perfect. Perfect enough to quit your job and take a leap of faith with me. The question had been hanging between them for weeks. Breno had already given notice at Hart Investments, much to his board's dismay, and Venetia Sterling's barely concealed fury. The Hartwell merger had fallen through exactly as Venetia had predicted, but instead of regret, Breno seemed lighter, freer, more like himself than she'd ever seen him. I'm scared, Jasmine admitted. Of what? Of failing, of this being too good to be true, of waking up one day and realizing we got caught up in some beautiful fantasy. Breno set down his sketchpad and moved closer to her on the couch, taking her hands in his. "Look at me, Jasmine." She did, meeting his steel blue eyes that had become her anchor in just a few short months. "This isn't a fantasy. You're not a fantasy. We're building something real together, step by step." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "But if you're not ready—" "I am ready," she said quickly. "I want this. I want us. I want everything we've been dreaming about." "Then what's stopping you?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something about it made her stomach clench with unease. "Hello? Is this Jasmine?" The voice was young, female, and shaking with emotion. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Thalia. Thalia Hart. I'm Breno's sister." Jasmine's eyes flew to Breno, who had gone completely still beside her. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know he hasn't mentioned me. We haven't spoken in 3 years, not since the thing with Delphine." The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "But I need to see him. Something's happened with our father, and I don't know who else to call." "What's wrong?" Breno asked, having heard enough to understand. "Is that him? Is he there?" Thalia's voice cracked. "Breno, please. Dad's in the hospital. They think it might be his heart. He's been asking for you." Breno took the phone from Jasmine's numb fingers. "Thalia, where are you?" "Mount Sinai. He collapsed at the office this afternoon. The doctors won't tell me anything because I'm not his emergency contact, and you're—" Her voice broke completely. "You're all I have left." Jasmine watched Breno's face cycle through emotions she'd never seen before. Shock, pain, fear, and something that looked like shame. "I'll be right there," he said quietly. "Really? You'll come?" "I'm on my way." After he hung up, they sat in silence for a long moment. The rain continued to patter against the windows, and the architectural drawings that had seemed so full of promise just minutes before now felt like artifacts from a different life. "You have a sister," Jasmine said finally. Have. I don't know." Breno ran his hands through his hair, that gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell when he was overwhelmed. "It's complicated. Everything with family is complicated." "Why didn't you tell me about her?" "Because I've spent 3 years trying to forget she exists." The harshness in his voice surprised her. "Breno, when Delphine left me at the altar, Thalia sided with her, said I probably deserved it, that I was too controlling, too focused on work, too much like our father." His voice was bitter with old pain. "She was 19 and thought she knew everything about love and relationships. So when Delphine painted me as the villain, Thalia believed her. She was just a kid. She was my sister. She was supposed to be on my side." Breno stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "Instead, she told me I was better off alone, that maybe Delphine did everyone a favor by showing me who I really was." Jasmine felt a chill run through her. "And you believed her?" "For a while, yeah. It confirmed everything I already thought about myself, that I was too damaged, too closed off, too much like my father to ever really love someone. Until now." "Until you." He turned back to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest tight. "You made me believe I could be different. Better. You are different. You are better. Am I? Or am I just the same selfish bastard who's about to abandon his dying father because I'm too proud to forgive a scared 19-year-old girl who said things she probably didn't mean?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Jasmine could see the war playing out in Breno's expression. Love against pride, forgiveness against old wounds. "What do you want to do?" she asked softly. "I want to stay here with you and pretend none of this is happening. I want to keep planning our future and forget about my past. But she's still my sister, and he's still my father, no matter how complicated things are between us." Jasmine stood and crossed to him, placing her hands on his chest. "Then go. Be with your family. Come with me." The request caught her off guard. "Breno, I can't. This is about you and your family. I don't belong." "You belong with me. Wherever I am, you belong." His hands framed her face. "I can't do this without you, Jasmine. I'm not strong enough to face all of this alone. You are strong enough. You're the strongest person I know. Not without you, not anymore." His eyes were pleading. "Please, I need you." Looking into his face, seeing the fear and pain he was trying so hard to hide, Jasmine realized this was one of those moments that would define everything between them. She could stay safe in her apartment, let him handle his family drama alone, keep their beautiful bubble intact, or she could step into his world completely, with all its complications and old wounds and messy truths. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll come with you." Relief flooded his features. Thank you. But Braino, you need to know. Whatever happens at that hospital, whatever your family thinks of me or us, I'm not going anywhere. This isn't just about tonight. This is about us building a life together, and that means dealing with the complicated parts too. I know, I want that, all of it. As they gathered their coats and prepared to leave for the hospital, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to step into something that would change everything between them. Meeting his family, seeing him in the context of his past, confronting the wounds that had shaped him, it felt like the real test of everything they'd built together. The rain had intensified by the time they reached the street, and as they climbed into a taxi, Jasmine realized that their perfectly planned evening had just become completely unpredictable. "Whatever happens," she said, taking his hand as the city blurred past the windows, "we face it together." "Together," he agreed, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty that made her wonder if either of them truly understood what they were walking into. The hospital loomed ahead of them, all white lights and antiseptic promises, and Jasmine had the sudden, terrible feeling that the beautiful life they'd been building was about to be tested in ways neither of them had anticipated. Some storms, she realized, you couldn't plan for. You could only hold tight to what mattered most and hope it was strong enough to survive whatever came next. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai Hospital made everything look stark and unforgiving. Jasmine walked beside Braino through the sterile corridors, their footsteps echoing off polished floors that smelled of disinfectant and fear. She could feel the tension radiating from him with every step, his jaw clenched, his shoulders rigid, his hand gripping hers like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. "She should be in the cardiac waiting area," he said quietly, his voice hoarse with emotion he was trying to suppress. They found Thalia curled up in an uncomfortable plastic chair, looking impossibly young and fragile. She had Braino's steel blue eyes and the same aristocratic bone structure, but where he carried himself with confidence, she seemed to be folding in on herself. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look like the college student she probably still was. When she saw Braino, her face crumpled with relief and guilt in equal measure. "You came," she whispered, standing on unsteady legs. "Of course I came." Braino's voice was carefully controlled, but Jasmine could see the emotion he was fighting to contain. "How is he?" "Stable for now. They said it was a mild heart attack, but—" Thalia's voice broke. "He looked so small, Braino, so fragile. I've never seen Dad look fragile before." For a moment neither sibling spoke. 3 years of hurt and pride and stubborn silence stretched between them like a chasm. "Thalia," Braino said finally, "this is Jasmine." Thalia turned to look at her properly for the first time, and Jasmine saw recognition flicker in her eyes. "You're the woman from the party, the one who stood up to Delphine. You heard about that. Everyone heard about that. It's been the talk of Manhattan society for months." A small, genuine smile crossed Thalia's face. "Cordelia Ashworth has been telling that story at every dinner party. She's quite fond of you." "Cordelia?" Jasmine looked confused. "The older woman who defended you that night," Braino explained. "She's been one of Manhattan's most influential socialites for 40 years. Her opinion carries weight." "Well," Thalia said, extending her hand to Jasmine, "anyone who can put Delphine Montclair in her place is all right in my book. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Before Jasmine could respond, a doctor in scrubs approached them. "Are you the Hart family?" "Yes," Braino answered. "How is he?" "Stable. The heart attack was moderate, not severe, but at his age we need to be cautious. He's been asking for his son." The doctor looked between Braino and Thalia. "He specifically asked for Braino. Can I see him?" "For a few minutes. He needs rest, but—" The doctor's expression softened. "He's been quite insistent." As they walked toward the cardiac unit, Thalia caught Braino's arm. "Before you go in there, I need to tell you something. About 3 years ago. About what I said." Braino stopped walking. "Thalia, no, let me say this. I was 19 and stupid and heartbroken because the woman I idolized turned out to be cruel and petty, but instead of admitting I was wrong about Delphine, I blamed you. I said terrible things because I was angry at myself for being so naive." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I've regretted it every day for 3 years, but I was too proud to call, too ashamed to admit I was wrong. And then when I heard about Jasmine, about how happy you were." "You heard about Jasmine? Dad's been keeping tabs on you. He's proud of you, Braino, even if he's too stubborn to say it. When he heard you'd walked away from the business to start your own firm, that you'd found someone who made you laugh again," Thalia wiped her eyes. "He said maybe his son had finally learned something he never could." "What's that supposed to mean?" That love is more important than pride. The words hit Breno like a physical blow. Jasmine watched his face cycle through emotions. Surprise, pain, hope, fear. Thalia, he said quietly, I said some terrible things too. I was hurt and angry, and I took it out on you when you were just a kid trying to figure out the world. Can you forgive me? Can you forgive me? They stared at each other for a moment. Then Thalia threw her arms around her brother, and suddenly they were both crying and laughing and holding each other like they used to when they were young. I missed you so much, Thalia whispered against his shoulder. I missed you too, little sister. Watching them reconcile, Jasmine felt her heart swell with emotion. This was what family looked like, messy and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. Mr. Hart, the nurse appeared beside them. Your father is ready to see you now. Breno looked at Jasmine, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Will you come with me? Are you sure? This is about you and your father. You're part of my life now, part of my family. His hand found hers, steady and sure. I want him to meet the woman I'm going to marry. The words hung in the air like a declaration. Jasmine's breath caught, her heart racing as she processed what he'd just said. Breno, she whispered, I know we haven't talked about it officially, but Jasmine, these past few months with you have been the best of my life. I want forever with you. I want to build our dreams together, face whatever comes together. His steel blue eyes were fierce with conviction. I want you to be my wife. Before she could respond, Thalia cleared her throat. Not to interrupt this romantic moment, but Dad is waiting, and the nurse looks like she's about to throw us all out. Breno laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension. We'll continue this conversation later? Definitely, Jasmine managed, her heart still pounding from his unexpected proposal. The cardiac unit was quieter than the rest of the hospital, filled with the steady beeping of monitors and the soft sound of ventilators. When they reached room 314, Breno paused outside the door, gathering himself. Together, Jasmine reminded him softly. Together, he agreed. The man in the hospital bed was clearly Breno's father. The same aristocratic features, the same steel blue eyes, though his were dimmed by exhaustion and medication. Despite being hooked up to various monitors, he still managed to look formidable, like a king holding court from his sickbed. About time you got here, he said, his voice gravelly but strong. I was beginning to think you decided to let the old man die alone. Hello, Dad. Breno approached the bed slowly, as if afraid his father might disappear. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, but I'm too stubborn to die yet. His eyes shifted to Jasmine, studying her with the same intensity she'd seen in Breno. And you must be the famous Jasmine, the woman who stole my son's heart and made him remember who he wants to be. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Hart, Jasmine said, stepping forward with more confidence than she felt. Nathaniel, and the pleasure is mine. I've heard quite a lot about you. You have. Did you think I wouldn't investigate the woman who convinced my son to walk away from a $100 million merger? Nathaniel's smile was sharp, but not unkind. What I found was much more interesting than a business report. Dad, Breno warned, I found a woman who put herself through college, who chooses meaningful work over money, who stands up to bullies and inspires my son to be the man I always hoped he could be. Nathaniel's expression softened. I found someone who loves my son for who he is, not what he has. The approval in his voice was unmistakable. Jasmine felt tears prick at her eyes. Breno tells me you're planning to start your own business together, Nathaniel continued. A bookstore and publishing house, an architecture firm, building something from scratch. We're still planning, Breno said carefully. Good. Hart Investments can provide the startup capital. Dad, we don't need... It's not charity, son. It's an investment. In you, in your future, in the family you're building. Nathaniel's eyes moved between Breno and Jasmine. Call it my engagement gift. The words hung in the air, loaded with meaning and possibility. Engagement? Jasmine said faintly. Oh, he hasn't made it official yet. Nathaniel looked amused. Well, that's disappointing. I was hoping to plan a wedding from this hospital bed. Give me something to look forward to during recovery. Dad, Breno said, but he was laughing now, the tension finally breaking. Don't dad me. Life's too short for hesitation, son. Trust me, I should know. Nathaniel looked directly at Jasmine. He loves you, you know, more than I've ever seen him love anything or anyone. Don't let pride or fear or practicality get in the way of something beautiful. As visiting hours came to an end and they prepared to leave, Nathaniel caught Breno's hand. I'm proud of you, he said quietly, for walking away from the merger, for choosing love over money, for being brave enough to build the life you want instead of the one you inherited. I learned from the best, Breno replied, squeezing his father's hand. No, son, you learned to be better than the best. And that's all a father can ask for. Walking out of the hospital into the cool night air, Jasmine felt like they were stepping into an entirely new world. The crisis had brought clarity, the confrontation had brought healing, and somehow, in the midst of fear and uncertainty, everything had shifted into place. So, Breno said as they waited for a taxi, about what I said earlier. About marrying me? About marrying you. He turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face in the gentle way that always made her heart race. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But Jasmine, I can't imagine my life without you in it. It is fast, she agreed. It is crazy. But she looked up into his steel blue eyes, seeing all the love and hope and future possibilities reflected there. But sometimes the best things in life are fast and crazy. Is that a yes? Breno Hart, she said, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. That's absolutely a yes. As the taxi pulled up and they climbed inside, heading back toward Brooklyn and the life they were building together, Jasmine realized that some love stories didn't follow traditional timelines. Some love stories moved at the speed of the heart, and the heart, she was learning, didn't always wait for permission to recognize home. Their fairy tale had begun with a fake arrangement, but what they'd built was beautifully, perfectly real. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed through the large windows of Pages and Prose, casting golden light across the carefully arranged bookshelves and the small cafe tucked into the corner, where the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the comforting smell of paper and ink. Jasmine Hart stood behind the counter, her wedding ring catching the light as she arranged a display of newly published books, the first titles from Hart Literary Press, the small publishing house she and Breno had built together. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore a soft green dress that brought out the amber in her eyes. At 29, she moved through her space with the confident grace of a woman who had found exactly where she belonged. Mrs. Hart, called Isla, the young barista they'd hired 6 months ago, there's a gentleman here who says he has an appointment with you about a manuscript. Jasmine looked up to see a nervous-looking man in his 50s clutching a worn manila envelope. She recognized the expression, hope mixed with terror, the look of someone who had poured their heart onto paper and was about to find out if anyone else would see the magic they'd tried to capture. Mr. Caldwell? She said warmly, coming around the counter. I'm so glad you could come in. Would you like some coffee? We can sit in the reading nook and talk about your work. As she settled into the comfortable armchair across from him, Jasmine caught sight of movement through the window. Breno was across the street standing in front of the building that would soon house Hart Architecture, talking animatedly with the contractor about the renovations. Even from a distance, she could see the excitement in his gestures, the way he moved his hands when he was describing a vision only he could see. The past 2 years had been a whirlwind of construction and creation, of turning dreams into reality, one careful step at a time. The bookstore cafe had opened 18 months ago and had quickly become a neighborhood gathering place. The small press had published 12 books so far, poetry collections, literary fiction, memoirs that might never have found a home with larger publishers but deserved to be read. Mrs. Hart, Mr. Caldwell's voice brought her attention back to the present. I wanted to thank you for agreeing to look at my work. When I read that interview you gave about publishing stories that matter rather than stories that sell. Every story matters to someone, Jasmine said gently. Tell me about yours. As he began to describe his novel, a love story set during the Korean War, inspired by his parents' courtship, Jasmine found herself thinking about love stories and how they began. Some started with grand gestures and dramatic moments. Others began quietly, in bookstores and over Ethiopian food, with conversations that revealed the shape of someone's heart. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see Breno entering, his hair slightly disheveled from the wind, his face bright with the enthusiasm that still made her pulse quicken even after 2 years of marriage. Sorry to interrupt, he said, approaching their table with that careful respect he always showed her work. Just wanted to let you know the final inspection passed. We can start moving into the office space next week. Really? Jasmine felt her heart lift. Everything's ready. Everything's ready. His smile was radiant. Hart Architecture is officially open for business. Mr. Caldwell looked between them with interest. You're married to the architect? How wonderful. It must be amazing to build a life and businesses together. It has its challenges, Bruno said, settling into the chair beside Jasmine with easy familiarity. But yes, it's pretty amazing. The challenges make it worth it, Jasmine added, her hand finding Bruno's automatically. When you're building something together, the difficult parts just make the foundation stronger. They finished the meeting with Mr. Caldwell. His novel showed promise and would need some editing, but there was real heart in it, and after he left, Jasmine and Bruno sat in the quiet cafe, surrounded by the life they'd created together. "Penny for your thoughts," Bruno said, studying her face with the attention he'd never stopped paying to her moods and expressions. "I was thinking about that night. The party, Delphine, all of it. Regrets? The opposite." Jasmine turned to face him fully. "I was thinking about how sometimes the most unexpected things turn out to be exactly what you need. Like agreeing to be a fake girlfriend for a man you barely knew. Like taking a chance on something that seemed impossible." Bruno reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture as tender now as it had been when they were new to each other. "For the record, you were never fake to me. From that first day in the bookstore, you were the most real thing in my life. Even when I was wearing a designer dress and pretending to be an art consultant, especially then, because even in costume you couldn't hide who you really were." His steel blue eyes were warm with memory and love. "You were brave and genuine and beautiful, and you made me remember what it felt like to want something more than success or approval. And what was that? Home. Love. A life that mattered because of who I shared it with." Before Jasmine could respond, the bell chimed again, and Thalia burst through the door, her arms full of flowers and her face bright with excitement. "Sorry I'm late," she called, setting the arrangements on the counter. "But wait until you see what came for you." She handed Jasmine an elegant envelope, heavy paper with beautiful calligraphy, addressing it to Mr. and Mrs. Bruno Hart. "What is it?" Bruno asked, looking over her shoulder as she opened it. "An invitation," Jasmine said, reading the formal script, "to Cordelia Ashworth's annual summer gala. She's asking us to be the guests of honor." "Guests of honor?" Thalia's eyes went wide. "Do you know what that means? Cordelia Ashworth's summer gala is the most exclusive event in Manhattan society. Being guests of honor is like being crowned by the Queen herself." Jasmine looked at the invitation, then at Bruno, and suddenly they were both laughing. "What's so funny?" Thalia demanded. 2 years ago, I was terrified of walking into that world," Jasmine said. "Now they want to honor us." "You changed that world," Bruno said simply. "You showed them that authenticity and kindness matter more than pedigree and bank accounts." "We changed it," she corrected. "Together." "So will you go?" Thalia asked. "Will you accept?" Jasmine looked around the bookstore, their bookstore, with its warm lighting and comfortable chairs, its carefully curated selection of books, and the small press books on display near the register. She looked at Bruno, whose face showed the same contentment she felt, the satisfaction of building something meaningful together. "You know what?" she said finally. "I think we will. But this time, we're going as ourselves. No pretending, no fake anything. Just us." "Just us," Bruno agreed, raising her hand to his lips to press a soft kiss to her wedding ring. "Exactly as we are." As afternoon faded into evening, and they closed the store together, walking hand in hand back to their apartment, larger now, but still in Brooklyn, still surrounded by the community that had become their chosen family, Jasmine realized that the best love stories weren't about transformation. They were about recognition, about finding someone who saw you exactly as you were and loved you not despite your imperfections, but because of your wholeness. She had started as a bookstore clerk who dreamed of publishing poetry. Now she was a successful small press owner, a beloved community member, and the wife of a man who still brought her coffee every morning and still looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing in any room. Some fairy tales, she thought as they climbed the familiar stairs to their home, didn't end with happily ever after. They ended with happily ever continuing, with the understanding that love wasn't a destination, but a journey, and the best journeys were taken hand in hand. Behind them, the lights of pages and prose glowed warmly in the Brooklyn evening, a beacon for dreamers and readers, and anyone who believed that sometimes the most beautiful stories were the ones you wrote yourself. Would you have made the same choice? What did this story teach you about love, dreams, and the courage to build something beautiful with another person? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.